Hello everyone, welcome to today's very exciting launch event. Most of you know Buyapowa as the referral people. We've spent over a decade helping you turn your customers into your best sales team, and more recently powering Golden Hello acquisition rewards. But today we're closing the loop with reward-led retention. So let me set the stage here, because most retention strategies and the platforms that power them suffer from a serious case of mistaken identity. They try to act like retail loyalty programs, the coffee shop model, where the more you shop, the better your chance of a reward. But unless you're selling lattes, that punch card approach is just weird. Retail is about habits, high frequency, routine interactions. Let me just grab some eggs for the morning. But in a regulated or subscription-based business, your customers don't have habits, they have decisions. And while what you do is absolutely vital, customers aren't waking up every Tuesday and deciding to be loyal to their bank or their insurer. Most of the time, you're the background noise of their lives. You're fridge hum, the intellectual equivalent of a terms and conditions page. Vital, but if anyone says they're thinking about you on a Thursday night, they're lying. Customers only actually tune into your frequency on the 364th day of the year, when the renewal hits and maybe the price jumps. And at that point, you aren't a service anymore. You are a surprise bill with a logo. So if you treat those rare but high stakes decisions like a routine caffeine run, you're essentially trying to perform surgery with a disposable coffee stirrer. And that's exactly why we've evolved. We built the solution we're launching today because a targeted reward at a critical moment acts like a circuit breaker. It stops the churn signal before it travels through the whole house. Now, retention shouldn't be a lonely silo in the marketing department. Retention is a framework that needs to work across your entire enterprise. Your contact centers, they need to make consistent pre-approved actions during high-pressure save conversations. Service and operations, they want the ability to make controlled gestures after failures or complaints, restoring trust while the customer is still engaged. Renewals and commercial teams, obviously, they want to reinforce value at contract milestones before any doubt creeps in. And Lifecycle and CRM want to deliver targeted win-back and recognition moments where timing and relevance matter most. Now, I'm going to go into more detail about what we've built in a minute, but first, let me bring our founder and CEO, Gideon Laskin. Gideon, this shift wasn't just a roadmap item we dreamt up out of the blue. It was a reality coaxed out of us by our clients and the things they told us that they needed. Why don't you take us through how that journey actually happened?
Thanks, Robin. Hello, everybody. Wherever you're joining us from today, whether that's the UK, Italy, Ireland, Greece, France, Spain, Canada, the US, or somewhere else entirely, it's genuinely great to have you here with us. Many of you we've been working with for years now, and for those of you who are newer to Buyapowa, welcome. Robin and I thought we'd co-host today because what we're talking about isn't just product updates or roadmap items. It's really about how this space is evolving and the role many of you have played in shaping that evolution. Because when we started Buyapowa, our focus was very clear. Referral, helping companies grow by turning their customers into advocates. And over the years, we've seen just how powerful that can be. When referral works well, it doesn't just acquire customers, it acquires better customers. Customers who arrive through trust, customers who convert faster, customers who stay longer. And many of the programs run by people watching today have demonstrated exactly that. But something interesting started happening as those programs matured. Clients started asking us a different set of questions. Not just how do we acquire customers through referrals, but how do we reward customers more effectively? How do we use incentives to influence behavior? How do we strengthen relationships with customers over time? And that naturally led us into the second phase of what we do, which is what we've been talking about over the last couple of years, reward-led acquisition, using incentives more broadly, not just for referrals, but across acquisition journeys, rewarding switching, rewarding signups, rewarding key moments in the customer journey. And again, many of you watching today have been pushing that forward with us. But over the past year or so, the conversation started shifting again. More and more clients began asking something slightly different. Acquisition is important, of course, but retention is becoming just as important. How do we encourage renewals? How do we reinforce loyalty? How do we influence behavior over the lifetime of a relationship? And that's where the next chapter really begins, not as a sudden pivot, not as something experimental, but as a natural extension of what we've already been building together. Over the last year, we've been working with a number of clients on exactly this, reward-led retention, using incentives to encourage renewal, strengthen engagement, and reinforce long-term customer relationships. And what we've seen so far has been incredibly promising, because the same behavioral principles that make referrals work, the same principles that make incentives powerful in acquisition, well, they also apply to retention, reciprocity, timing, recognition, and influencing behavior at key moments in the customer life cycle. Now, there's another piece of context that I think is really important here, because the industries represented by many of you watching today are not typical consumer businesses. Energy, telecoms, insurance, financial services, these are regulated industries. You operate in environments where trust matters enormously, where compliance matters enormously, where customer journeys are complex, where long-term relationships are fundamental. And for a long time, companies in these industries have been asked to make do with platforms that were never really designed for them. Platforms built for retail, platforms built for e-commerce, platforms built for fast transactions. But your businesses don't work like that. Your relationships with customers are long-term. They involve contracts, renewals, policies, service interactions. And that requires a completely different approach, which is why we've always believed something quite strongly at Buyapowa, that regulated industries deserve platforms built specifically for them, not adapted from retail, not simplified e-commerce tools, but infrastructure designed from the ground up for the realities of regulated businesses like yours. That belief has shaped everything we've built so far, and it's shaping the next chapter too. Robin, back to you.
Thanks, Gideon. And he's absolutely right. If you try and force a fast transaction retail tool into a world of complex contracts and renewals, it's going to break. You need a specific infrastructure designed for the realities of a regulated business. When you have that foundation in place, you move away from improvised gestures and into real, joined up retention marketing. Now, the commercial impact of having a specific built-for-purpose engine is huge. Variance in offers drops by 60%. This is about plugging the silent leaks in your profit margin. It's the end of the Wild West, where your commercial strategy is essentially a raffle held at the discretion of a call center agent who might be having a particularly generous Wednesday. Retention uplift, 22%, because customers in similar situations get similar treatment. Making exactly the right decision now happens at scale. And those decisions happen faster too. Teams aren't agonizing over what to offer. The logic's pre-approved and governed. It's what happens when rewards are infrastructure, not an afterthought. Now, Gideon, I know you've got a couple of thought experiments lined up to help us understand how rewards can have a transformative effect on retention. What's first?
All right, thanks, Robin. Here's a slightly different experiment. Imagine I give you a mug. It's now yours. You're welcome. A minute later, I ask, how much would someone have to pay you to sell it? Now imagine the opposite. You don't own the mug, and I ask, how much would you pay to buy it? These numbers are almost always completely different. People demand much more to give something up than they would pay to acquire it. This is called the endowment effect. Once we feel something belongs to us, we value it more. And this matters in retention. When customers feel they already possess benefits, rewards, loyalty, status, privileges, they become far more reluctant to give them up. Ownership changes behavior. Robin, back to you.
Thank you, Gideon. That sense of ownership is everything. And if you get the timing right, it's a game changer. Reward-led retention can be a winning hand, but you have to play that hand at the right moment of truth. Because like I said before, for regulated or subscription-based businesses, most of the time you lay out the concrete foundations under a house. Absolutely essential, but not something people think about day to day. You only become real to customers in a few very specific windows. The exit. When a customer says they're leaving, they've already got one foot out of the door and you need something tangible to keep the conversation going. The ghosting. They've already left, so how are you going to make them come back? A reward signals that you value their return every bit as much as a new sign-up. The renewal. The introductory offer anesthetic wears off. The price jumps. Suddenly the customer's shocked out of their brand blindness. They go from fridge hum to high definition scrutiny in the time it takes to read a billing notification. You aren't just fighting a competitor at this point, you're fighting the sudden return of the customer's memory. And finally, the service failure. Brilliant, you got noticed, but only because you messed up. Rewards are the best, maybe the only real way to turn a frown upside down, making a mistake into a masterclass in care. Makes sense, right? The problem is what I like to call the bodge. Most organizations got great intentions when it comes to retention, but the execution is clunky. It's like a high-end restaurant where the chef's working miracles in the kitchen, but the waiters are all making up their own prices at the tables to keep everyone happy. So this is what we generally see when brands don't have a unified retention strategy, and it's a textbook anatomy of a broken process. First, improvised retention. Different teams handling the same problem with totally different tools. Your contact center is doing one thing while your CRM team's doing another thing, and there is no single version of the truth. Aspect 2 of the bodge is the wild west of offers. Without central control, your retention strategy is basically the Price is Right, but hosted by a stressed out agent in a cubicle. One customer gets a month free, the next get a £20 voucher because they mentioned they have the same kind of cat as your agent, and you've turned your profit margin into a personality contest. Let's be honest, Doris on the phone is lovely, but she shouldn't be the one deciding your EBITDA. Next up, there's the education of the customer. This is the most dangerous part. When you bodge retention moments like these, you eventually train your customers that the loudest squeak gets the most oil. You're teaching them to complain or to threaten to leave just to see what they can get. And finally, there is operational paralysis. All this improvisation makes costs hard to predict, explain, or control. And because the data is fragmented, learning what actually works takes far too long. Good approaches don't spread because they're not codified. They're just flukes and they're impossible to repeat. Right. Gideon, before we look at how we're going to fix all this, why don't you take us through another thought experiment?
Thanks, Robin. Imagine a loyalty card. You need 10 purchases to earn a reward. Now imagine a different card. You need 12 purchases, but 2 stamps are already filled in. Both require the same effort. But which one feels closer to completion? Most people say the second because it feels like you've already started. This is known as the goal gradient effect. When people feel they've made progress towards something, they accelerate their behavior, which is why milestones, tiers, and progress indicators can be so powerful in retention programs. They reinforce the feeling that a customer relationship is moving forward. Robin, back to you, buddy.
So that momentum that Gideon just described is exactly what Buyapowa clients like Admiral are playing into. Clients who helped us shape this new solution. Admiral don't wait for the exit interview to start the conversation. They recognize value before the customer starts shopping around, using rewards to effectively lock in a sense of ownership before the first crack in any relationship appears. Then you've got the EAA. In live save conversations, when the price literally cannot move any further, a tangible reward acts as the bridge over that value gap. or any Iberia who've mastered the golden apology, using rewards in service recovery to turn a complaint into a genuine reason to stay. Whether it's Electric Ireland driving feature adoption to develop really sticky customer relationships, or British Gas automating rewards at the contract end to stop churn before it even begins, the engine underneath is exactly the same. It's all about replacing the bodge with a controlled, reward-led approach that actually respects the complexity of your industry and the behavioral science governing your customers. And with that in mind, over to Gideon, who's going to go into that science before we take a look at the engine behind our solution.
Hi, everyone. I want to start with a question. Why do customers stay? If you ask most organizations, the answers tend to sound quite familiar. They'll say customers stay because they're satisfied, because the service is good, because the brand is trusted, because loyalty has been earned. And of course, those things really matter, but behavioral science suggests something slightly different. Customers don't stay because they're loyal. They stay because their behavior has been shaped, sometimes deliberately, often accidentally. And when you look closely at industries like energy, telecoms, insurance, or financial services, something interesting appears. Customers don't leave randomly. They leave at very predictable moments. They leave when a contract expires. They leave when a renewal notice arrives. They'll leave when a bill goes up. They'll leave when a competitor offers something that looks slightly better. The decision to leave rarely comes out of nowhere. It happens at specific points in the customer journey. These points are behavioral moments, and behavior, as it turns out, is remarkably predictable. So what does behavioral science tell us? Well, over the past 40 years, behavioral economists and psychologists have studied how people make decisions. Researchers like Daniel Kahneman and Richard Thaler showed something that is now widely accepted. Human beings are not perfectly rational decision makers. We like to think that we are, but in reality, our decisions are influenced by predictable psychological forces. We're influenced by reciprocity. We're influenced by loss aversion. We're influenced by immediate rewards. We're influenced by habits, and we're influenced by recognition. These principles show up everywhere. They influence how people save money. They influence how people respond to pricing. They influence how people make purchasing decisions. And importantly, they influence how people behave as customers. The surprising thing is that many customer retention strategies still ignore these forces completely. Companies spend enormous amounts of time measuring satisfaction. They run NPS surveys. They invest in service improvements, but they rarely design retention programs around how humans actually behave. And that's where behavioral incentives become interesting. The first principle, reciprocity. One of the most powerful forces in human behavior is reciprocity. When someone gives us something, we feel an instinctive desire to return the favor. This behavior is deeply embedded in human culture. If someone buys you lunch, you feel the urge to buy lunch next time. If someone helps you, you want to help them back. That instinct doesn't disappear when we become customers. It shows up in brand new relationships too. When a company recognizes you, thanks you, or rewards you, something subtle changes. The relationship stops feeling purely transactional. It begins to feel personal. And when that happens, behavior often changes. The interesting thing here is that the value of the reward is not always the most important factor. The signal matters just as much. Discounts often feel transactional. They feel like price adjustments. Rewards feel different. Rewards feel like recognition. That small difference changes the psychology of the interaction. Here's a simple example. Imagine two different scenarios. In the first scenario, your telecom provider reduces your bill by £10. In the second scenario, they send you a £10 gift card and say, thanks for being a customer for another year. Financially, the value is identical, but psychologically, the experiences feel completely different. The bill reduction feels invisible. The rewards feel intentional. And behavioral science tells us that intention really matters. The second principle, timing. Another powerful principle in behavioral economics is present bias. Humans place far more value on rewards that arrive immediately rather than rewards that arrive later. You can see this effect everywhere. Most people will choose 10 euros today rather than 20 euros in a month, even though waiting would clearly be the rational decision. The same thing happens with customer behavior. A reward delivered immediately after an action, renewing a contract, completing a service installation, or resolving a problem, has far more behavioral impact than something delivered months later. Timing amplifies value. A small reward delivered immediately can influence behavior more effectively than a larger reward delivered in the future. And this is one of the reasons that traditional loyalty programs often struggle. They reward behavior too late. They reward behavior too indirectly. They miss the moment when behavior is actually being decided. The third principle, loss aversion. One of the most famous insights from behavioral science is something called loss aversion. People dislike losses far more than they enjoy gains. In fact, research suggests that the pain of losing something can be twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. That insight has profound implications for customer retention. Let me show you an example. So imagine you receive a renewal message that says, renew today and receive a £20 reward. Now imagine a different message. You currently receive $20 in annual rewards every year. Don't lose them when your contract ends. Same reward, same value, but a completely different psychological framing. The second message taps directly into loss aversion, and that subtle difference can significantly influence behavior. The fourth principle, habit. Another key behavioral driver is habit formation. Human behavior is heavily influenced by routines. When actions are repeated and reinforced, they gradually become automatic. You see this with fitness apps, you see it with loyalty schemes, you see it with gaming platforms. The same principle applies to customer relationships. Small rewards delivered periodically can reinforce engagement and strengthen the habit of staying. Over time, customers stop actively evaluating whether to stay or leave. Staying simply becomes the default. The fifth principle, recognition. The final behavioral principle I want to mention is recognition. Humans have a deep desire to be acknowledged. Recognition creates emotional connection. A simple message saying, thank you for being a customer for 3 years, can have a surprisingly powerful effect because recognition reinforces identity. Customers begin to think of themselves as loyal customers. And once that identity forms, behavior often follows. Why does this matter for regulated industries? Now, here's the interesting part. Industries like energy, telecoms, insurance, financial services have very predictable customer life cycles. Customers renew contracts, policies renew annually, tariffs change, accounts reach milestones. All of these events create moments when behavior is most likely to change. Behavioral scientists would call these decision points, moments when a customer actively decides whether to stay, switch, or disengage. Those moments are incredibly valuable because they create opportunities to influence behavior. Not through pressure, not through aggressive discounts, but through well-timed behavioral incentives. So, there's been a shift in thinking. Historically, rewards have mostly been used to drive acquisition. Referral programs, welcome bonuses, promotional bonuses, but the same behavioral principles can be applied throughout the customer lifecycle. Rewards can encourage renewal. Rewards can increase engagement. Rewards can repair relationships after service issues. Rewards can strengthen long-term loyalty. In other words, incentives are not just acquisition tools. They're behavioral tools. Where do we come in? At Buyapowa, we spent many years helping companies use behavioral incentives to acquire customers through referrals. Referral programs work because they combine trust between friends with well-designed incentives. What we've realized is that the same behavioral science that powers referrals can power retention too. The same principles, reciprocity, timing, loss aversion, recognition. These ideas apply across the entire customer journey. And that's why we've been developing a new approach, one that allows companies to apply behavioral incentives, not just at the point of acquisition, but throughout the life cycle of the customer relationship, encouraging renewal, encouraging engagement, and strengthening long-term customer relationships. Behavioral science has been studying human decision-making for decades. The insights are clear. Human behavior is not random. It is shaped by predictable psychological forces. The companies that understand those forces have an enormous opportunity because loyalty isn't simply a feeling. Loyalty is a behavior, and behavior can be shaped. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Gideon. I love this stuff. Loyalty is a behavior, right? If we accept that behavior can be shaped, the question for all of you watching today is, what tool are you using to shape it? That's the core of our solution. We take a process that's usually a chaotic, improvised freestyle, and we harden it into an industrial grade circuit. We aren't just hoping the customer stays, we're engineering the inertia that makes leaving feel like a massive error on their part. It works in 4 clean steps. First, the trigger. Starts with a moment. This is the signal from your system or one of your teams that a customer has hit a crossroad. Secondly, there's the action. We define the clear behavior you want to influence. Not a vague feeling, but a concrete action. Something like hitting the renew button, or even something small but important, something that might keep the customer loyal, like downloading your app or signing up for SMS alerts. Third up is the reward. We apply a pre-agreed capped incentive designed to deliver impact without setting a bad precedent for the future. And finally, there's the delivery, with Buyapowa handling all the fulfillment and reporting securely, consistently. By following this circuit, rewards stop being a desperate last-minute negotiation tool. They become a controlled retention mechanism that your teams can use with total confidence. It's how you turn a customer's decision into something you do, not them. So, why Buyapowa? Why not just buy 1,000 Amazon vouchers and call it a day? Because we're built specifically for complex, regulated industries. We aren't an adaptive retail tool. Our platform delivers infrastructure designed for environments where trust, compliance, and consistency are the only things that matter. In your world, rewards are powerful, but they carry a massive risk if they're not governed. Our platform is designed to make rewards safe at scale, secure, auditable, and consistent across every team, every channel, and every territory. That safety comes from a very clear division of labor. You decide which moments matter and which actions you want to influence and where the commercial boundaries sit. You own the strategy. Where we add value is in the execution, offering customers a choice of the right rewards for the right behaviors and keeping the whole program explainable to your finance and compliance teams. It's about getting all the upside of a reward-led strategy without the Wild West downside. Of course, for a reward to shape behavior has to be relevant, and this is our answer to that. We provide thousands and thousands of rewards across a huge number of countries and currencies, giving you global breadth with local relevance. But here's the clever part. You get that entire catalog through one supplier relationship with automated, effortless delivery. You don't want your team sourcing vouchers ad hoc, like they're buying last-minute Secret Santa gifts. You want to use rewards confidently at scale without the operational headache, and that's what we do. We also know that enterprise change doesn't happen overnight, which is why we built our platform with real-world constraints in mind. You can start light using existing triggers and only add automation where it genuinely moves the needle. Pre-agreed values, eligibility, and counts keep your costs predictable, while full auditability ensures your governance teams can sleep at night. This is reward-led retention designed for the friction-heavy reality of the C-suite. It's built to survive a collision with a compliance officer's red pen, the only retention tool that treats governance as a feature, not a bug. So that's reward-led retention from Buyapowa. The third painting in the triptych of Buyapowa's big picture: referral, acquisition, and retention. Most companies try to solve these 3 things with disconnected tools that refuse to speak to each other. It's a Frankenstein's monster of tech, stitched together with spreadsheets and hope. We're offering one foundation, one secure platform, one integration, one source of truth for reporting, and one supplier relationship. It means you can reuse the same reward capability across the entire lifecycle, rather than buying 3 different hammers to hit the same nail. To wrap up then, Gideon has shown us that human behavior is predictable, shapeable, and driven by deep-seated psychological forces. I've shown you that the current bodge, the improvised messy status quo, is essentially a tax on your growth and a drain on your profit margins. The choice isn't between having a retention strategy and not having one. You probably already got one. The question is whether your strategy is a series of expensive vibes delivered by individual agents or a governed industrial grade engine that works while you sleep. We've built the engine. We've codified the science of staying. So if you're ready to stop subsidizing the loudest complainers and start shaping the behaviors that actually grow your business, we are ready to help. Thank you for your time today. We'll be in touch.